Hey, welcome to the discussion about the heart chakra, number 4 in our series, using Anatomy of the Spirit, written by Dr. Carolyn Myss. The fourth chakra is the heart chakra, and it's about emotional power. And this is a big one with a lot of interesting lessons today because there's kind of a cultural environment of people being stuck here in this chakra, in the development of the spiritual maturity that can come with this heart chakra. So the heart chakra being the fourth, it's right in the middle of 7. It's a central powerhouse, and it mediates between the lower chakras of the body and the upper chakras of the spirit. The fourth chakra is emotional in nature, and it teaches us how to act out of love and compassion and to recognize that love is the most powerful energy that we have. The sacred truth of the heart chakra is love is divine power. Love is life force in its purest form. Love has the power to heal. The developed emotional energy of the heart chakra is divine and beyond corruption. It's beyond worldly pain. Connecting to this power is like entering a sacred sanctuary. And the peace in our heart, the peace that we have about the truth of who we are, is the key to entering this sanctuary. It makes sense that a primary healing force is forgiveness and the emotional cleansing and relief that it provides. I love how Dr. Carolyn Myss articulates the difference between the common misconception of forgiveness that we have that is preventing people from accepting this gift that is forgiveness, and it's preventing them from accessing the spiritual maturity that comes with it. So let's dive into it. The heart chakra is energetically connected to the heart and circulatory system, the ribs, breasts, and thymus gland, the lungs, shoulders, arms, hands, and diaphragm. The heart chakra resonates to our emotional perceptions, how we feel about what's going on, and the emotional energy that creates. Emotional perceptions determine the quality of our lives far more than mental perceptions, as a lot of people believe. As children, we react to life with quite a range of emotions, from confidence, love, and compassion to envy, fear, and hate. As adults, we need to learn how to generate within ourselves an emotional climate and steadiness from which to act consciously and with compassion. More than any other chakra, the heart chakra represents our capacity to let go and let God, as Dr. Myss says. With its energy, we accept our personal emotional challenges as extensions of a divine plan, which has as its intent our conscious evolution. By releasing our emotional pain, by letting go of our need to know why things have happened as they have, we reach a state of tranquility. And from here, we can achieve inner peace if we can, quote, embrace the healing energy of forgiveness and release our lesser need for human self-determined justice. Dr. Myss also provides a corresponding sacrament and sephirot designation with each chakra in her book. And the heart chakra is congruent with the sephirot of Tiferet, the it is symbolic of beauty and compassion within God and the endless pouring forth of nurturing life force. The heart chakra also correlates with the sacrament of marriage. Now, as an archetype, marriage represents first and foremost a bond with oneself, the internal union of self and soul. Last week, I posted a video about the third chakra, the solar plexus energy center of personal power and the ego. The third chakra focuses on our feelings about ourselves in relation to the physical world. The fourth chakra, though, the heart chakra, focuses on our feelings about our internal world, our emotional responses to our own thoughts, ideas, attitudes, and inspirations, as well as the attention that we give to our emotional needs. There are primary fears and primary strengths of the heart chakra. The primary fears include the fear of loneliness, the fear of commitment, the fear of following one's heart, the fear of the inability to protect oneself emotionally, or fear of emotional weakness and betrayal. Loss or blockage of heart chakra energy can give rise to jealousy, bitterness, anger, hatred, and an inability to forgive others as well as oneself. The strengths of the heart chakra are love, forgiveness, compassion, dedication, inspiration, hope, trust, and the ability to heal oneself and others. The sacred truth of the fourth chakra, again, is that love is divine power. Mental energy may be generally considered superior to emotional energy, but emotional energy is the true motivator of the human body and spirit. Love in its purest form, unconditional love, is the substance of the divine, Dr. Myss says. Our hearts are designed to express beauty, compassion, forgiveness, and love. It is against our spiritual nature to act otherwise. We spend our life learning about love. Its energy is pure power. We are attracted to love as we are intimidated by it. We are motivated by love, controlled by it, inspired by it, healed by it, and destroyed by it. Each of life's challenges, Dr. Myss says, is a lesson in some aspect of love. How we respond to those challenges is recorded within our cell tissues. We live within the biological consequences of our biographical choices. We learn about love in stages, and the stages follow the design of our chakras. As the root chakra is awakening the first chakra, we're learning love from our tribe. We're learning about loyalty and the shared love among the group or family. As the second chakra, the sacral, awakens, we learn about love through friendships. We experience caring for and loving people who are outside of our family. As the third chakra awakens, we discover love of external things, our personal, physical, and material needs, such as athletics, academics, fashion, dating and mating, occupation and home, and the body itself. So these first three chakras involve love in the external world. At one time in our civilization, Dr. Myss says, these three practices of love were all that life required. Very few people needed more than the tribal and partnership love. But now we're coming to recognize in our time that love is, quote, a force that influences and perhaps determines biological activity. Love helps us heal others and ourselves. And so everyone knows the expression, if you can't love yourself, you can't love anyone. But for many people, Dr. Myss says, loving oneself remains a vague notion, which we often act out in material ways like shopping and extravagant vacations. But rewarding oneself with trips and toys is third chakra love, using physical pleasure to express self-appreciation. While this type of reward is enjoyable, it can obstruct our contact with the deeper emotional stirrings of the heart that emerge when we need to evaluate a relationship or a job or some other troubled circumstance that affects our health. The heart chakra challenge to love oneself means having the courage to listen to the heart's emotional messages and spiritual directives. The archetype to which the heart most frequently guides us for healing is that of the wounded child. The wounded child within each of us, Dr. Myss says, contains the damaged or stunted emotional patterns of our youth, patterns of painful memories, of negative attitudes, and of dysfunctional self-images. So this is kind of like the shadow self, the unintegrated or denied parts of ourselves that, though subconscious and hidden from our awareness, they greatly influence our behavior. Unknowingly, Dr. Myss says, we may continue to operate within these patterns as adults, albeit in a new form. Fear of abandonment, for example, becomes jealousy. Sexual abuse becomes dysfunctional sexuality, often causing a repetition of the same violations with our own children. Loving oneself begins with confronting this archetypal force within the psyche and unseating the wounded child's authority over us. If unhealed, wounds keep us living in the past. Now, following our intuitive guidance is the highest form of preventive healthcare. I thought that was a really powerful quote in this book because this is just not on a lot of people's radar, and what an untapped power this is. Following our intuitive guidance, she says, is the highest form of preventive health care. These internal guidance systems come at a time when we are mature enough to act on their messages. The awakened spiritual energies of the heart can alert us to the negative memories that could begin to harm our physical health. Our intuitive guidance systems alert us to the negative currents before they become a physical illness. Forgiveness is an essential part of healing. In the teachings of Jesus, forgiveness is a spiritual act of perfection, and Jesus always first healed his patients' emotional sufferings. The physical healing then followed naturally. Forgiveness is an essential spiritual act, she says, that must occur in order to open oneself fully to the healing power of love. Self-love means caring for ourselves enough to forgive people in our past so that the wounds can no longer damage us. For our wounds do not hurt the people who hurt us, they only hurt us. Releasing our attachment to these wounds, Dr. Myss says, enables us to move from the childlike relationship with the divine of the first three chakras into one in which we participate with the divine in acting out of the love and compassion of the fourth chakra. Participating in the divine in acting out these energies of love and compassion. We have to rise above so much of our BS to do this. The spiritual maturity of the heart chakra comes with the healing of the wounded child. The wounded child sees the divine as operating a reward and punishment system with humanly logical explanations for all the painful experiences. The wounded child does not understand that within all experiences, no matter how painful, lie spiritual insights. So long as we think like a wounded child, we will love conditionally and with great fear of loss. Dr. Myss remarks that our culture as a whole is evolving toward healing from its emphasis on wounds and victimization. Once we have entered into the power of our wounds, it is difficult to see how we let go of this negative power and move ahead toward becoming unwounded and self-empowered. Our fourth chakra culture, as she puts it, has not yet moved out of its wounds and into spiritual adulthood. Spiritual adulthood is about awakening the conscious self. We get out of the fourth chakra, she says, by going through it and learning its lessons. When we enter the interior of our own hearts, we leave behind the familiar thought patterns of the lower three chakras and particularly our tribal heart. We begin the formidable task of getting to know ourselves by discovering our emotional nature, not in relation to anyone or anything, but in relation to ourselves alone. With or without anyone else playing a primary role, a person needs to ask themselves these questions. What do I like? What do I love? What makes me happy? What do I need for balance? What are my strengths? Can I rely on myself? What are my weaknesses? Why do I do the things that I do? What makes me need the attention and approval of others? Am I strong enough to be close to another person and still honor my own emotional needs? These questions are different from those of the tribal mind, which teaches us to ask, what do I like in relation to others? How strong can I be while remaining attractive to others? What will I have to change about myself in order to get someone to love me? We don't easily pursue questions of self-exploration because we know that the answers will require us to change our lives. But the meeting of the self activates the transformation of human consciousness. Dr. Myss says that prior to the 1960s, this kind of self-examination was the domain of only the more peripheral members of society, the mystics, the artists, philosophers, and other types of creative geniuses. But the 1960s had this revolutionary energy that led millions of people to unearth the secrets of their heart and begin to articulate the details of our wounded childhoods that still shape much of our adult personalities. The symbolic meaning of the sacrament of marriage is that one must be in union with one's own personality and spirit first. After one has a clear understanding of oneself, they can create a successful intimate partnership. The increase in divorce nationwide is rooted directly in the opening of the fourth chakra, which draws people into self-discovery for the first time. Many people ascribe the breakdown of their marriage to the fact that their spouse had given them no support for their emotional, psychological, and intellectual needs, and as a result, they had to seek out a true partnership. The opening of the fourth chakra has also changed our consciousness about health, healing, and the cause of illness. Whereas disease was once thought of as caused by essentially lower chakra sources, genetics and germs, she says, we now view the origin of disease as stemming from toxic emotional stress levels. Healing begins with the repair of emotional injuries. I want to read you the story about Perry in her book. Excuse me. The following story reflects this shift. I met Perry, a physician, in one of my workshops. Perry had an enormous practice which generated the typical level of professional and personal stress. When the medical community became flooded with information on alternative theories and practices, Perry read bits and pieces but continued prescribing conventional treatments for his patients because he did not know enough about alternative treatments to recommend them. About 5 years ago, Perry decided to attend a seminar on alternative therapies. He was remarkably impressed not only by the scientific validity of the material presented, but by the case studies his colleagues discussed. Immediately upon returning to work, he viewed all his patients differently, and began to ask them about their personal problems during the course of regular exams. Perry read books on holistic health and attended more lectures and seminars on the topic he found most interesting, the emotional component of disease. Little by little, Perry lost faith in conventional treatments. He wanted to discuss his feelings with his colleagues, but they did not share his interest. He reached a point where he no longer felt comfortable writing out prescriptions, but did not yet feel confident enough to recommend simply that a patient seek other treatments. Eventually, he dreaded going to his office so much that he actually considered leaving the practice of medicine. Then one day, while preparing to meet with a new patient, Perry, at 52, suffered a heart attack at his desk. During his recovery, he asked to meet with both a psychotherapist and a spiritual advisor. He received counseling for several months and then took a leave of absence from his practice, during which time he studied alternative care. Eventually, he created a treatment center where the emotional, psychological, and spiritual needs of patients could be attended to along with physical needs. I suffered a very severe heart attack, said Perry. I will always believe that I regained my health because I entered therapy and therefore entered into myself. I never realized that I was heartsick because of my medical practice until my heart literally became sick. What could be more obvious? For my own sake, I need to treat my patients with the care and awareness I now realize they need. I also need to care for myself differently, so I no longer keep the hours I once did in my practice. Now I make care of myself a priority. My entire life is healthier because I became ill and decided to believe that my heart attack was far more significant than merely developing an electrical problem in my coronary system. Okay, so let's move on to Woundology, the language of wounds. This is what's happening in our culture today. As a fourth chakra culture, Dr. Myss says, we have language of intimacy that is now based upon wounds. We have created a new language of intimacy that I call Woundology. We now use the revelation and exchange of our wounds as the substance of conversation, indeed, as the glue that binds a relationship. We have become so good at this, in fact, that we have converted our wounds into a type of relationship currency that we use to control situations and people. People can use their emotional history to control a conversation, in that they could make it a point to include a history of their victimization right off the bat, as if marketing it as a part of their identity. People can become seriously invested in the authority of their wounds, as opposed to being invested in actually healing them. And through becoming entrenched in our wounds, we convert them into a kind of social currency, perhaps because it gives us certain privileges, such as endless emotional support or having other people take on our responsibilities. Wounds as a language of intimacy have found an arena of expression within relationships as well as in healing support groups. Two people in a relationship can feel that they are a good match because they are wound mates. Their union, based upon wound intimacy, will have unspoken terms, such as being there to support each other through any difficult memories associated with the wound. This support includes revolving our social life or even our work life, around this, around the needs of our wounded partner. In this scenario, we may handle our partner's responsibilities as a way of showing the sincerity of our support. We accept all weaknesses and shortcomings rooted in wounds, since acceptance is crucial to healing. In short, Dr. Myss says, a bond based on wound intimacy is an implicit guarantee that weakened partners will always need each other and that we will forever have open passage to each other's interior. In terms of power, partners have never had such easy access to each other's vulnerabilities or so much acceptance for using wounds to order and control our close relationships. In other words, it's very normalized to use wound currency now. Wounded intimacy, Dr. Myss says, has found enormous support within the holistic healing community, particularly in the literature on the links between emotional pain and illness and between healing emotional traumas and the recovery of health. The media thrives on making public the details of people's wounds. Not only do we live within our wounds these days, we are entertained by the wounds of others. The legal system has learned to convert wounds into economic power. And once we too learn to speak Woundology, it can become extremely difficult to give up the privileges that accompany being wounded, especially in this fourth chakra culture that constantly rewards it. This problem with our support systems that are supposed to heal us, this problem with our support systems over coddling us, reflects our skewed understanding of compassion. Real compassion is the strength to honor another's suffering while bringing power back into one's life by empowering someone, not by coddling them. The coddling phase is supposed to be temporary. But she, acknowledges that this is part of an evolution. Once we have started talking about it, we didn't get it right off the bat how to make changes. Because our culture for so long, she says, did not allow time for healing the heart nor even recognize the need for it, we have overcompensated for this earlier failing by now failing to place any time boundaries around that healing. It's really difficult to tell someone that they need to move on or that they need to get back to the business of life. It really needs to be up to the individual to recognize the need to move toward that. Carolyn Myss beautifully describes the path to the empowered heart. And she says healing is simple, but for most people, it is not easy. The steps are few, but they demand great effort. And she provides 6 steps. The first is commit to healing all the way to the source of the pain. Turn inward and get to know your wounds. Step 2 on the path to the empowered heart is once inside, identify your wounds and investigate the presence of wound power in your present life. You may have to confront why you might fear healing. Have a trusted person reflect to you on the influence your wounds have had on your development. 3, once you've verbalized your wounds, observe how you might be using them to influence or even control people around you as well as yourself. Do you ever give yourself permission to quit something or not try at all by dwelling on your past and therefore encouraging depression? Are you afraid that if you were healed, you would lose intimate connections with certain people? These questions need to be addressed honestly. They are part of a significant cluster of reasons that people fear becoming healthy. 4, identify the good that can and has come from your wound. Start living within the consciousness of appreciation and gratitude. Initiate a spiritual practice and stick to it. Do not be casual about your spiritual discipline. 5, forgiveness. Forgiveness is not the same as telling the person who harmed you that it's okay. Forgiveness is a complex act of consciousness, one that liberates the psyche and soul from the need for personal vengeance and from the perception of oneself as a victim. More than releasing from blame the people who caused our wounds, forgiveness means releasing the control that the perception of victimhood has over our psyches. The liberation that forgiveness generates comes in that transition to a higher state of consciousness, not just in theory, but energetically and biologically. So evaluate what you need to do in order to forgive others and yourself if necessary. 6, the final step, think love. Live in appreciation and gratitude. Invite change into your life, if only through your attitude. Remind yourself continually of the message of all spiritual masters worth their salt. Keep your spirit in present time. In the language of Jesus, leave the dead and get on with your life. And as Buddha taught, there is only now. The 4th chakra is the center of the human energy system. Everything in and about our lives runs off the fuel of our hearts. We will all have experiences meant to break our hearts, but not in half, wide open. Regardless of how your heart is broken, your choice is always the same. What will you do with your pain? The question contained within the heart chakra will be presented to you again and again in your life until the answer you give becomes your own liberation. The subtle energies of this chakra continually direct us to discover and love ourselves, says Dr. Myss. This love is the essential key to finding the happiness that we are convinced lies outside of ourselves, but that spiritual texts remind us is only found within. People are scared of the change that would come with liberation. But in closing, I will share this with you. Carolyn Myss says, while the short-term effect of self-knowledge may well cause changes, its long-term developments, fueled by consciousness, not fear, will be more fulfilling. It makes no sense to seek to become intuitively conscious, then work to keep that consciousness from upsetting our lives. The only path toward consciousness is through the heart. That truth is not negotiable, no matter what spiritual tradition one chooses, as a means to know the divine. Love is divine power. And Carolyn Myss wonderfully provides some reflection questions at the end of each chakra study, and some of those I am going to offer you today. You may want to write them down and journal them, reflect on them, do whatever you like with them. Here they go. What emotional memories do you still need to heal? Do you use emotional wounds to control other people or situations? Have you ever allowed yourself to be controlled by the wounds of another person? Do you associate emotional health with no longer needing an intimate relationship? What is your understanding of forgiveness? What is your understanding of a healthy, intimate relationship? Are you willing to release the use of your wounds in order to open yourself to such a relationship? Thank you for watching.